Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. Inside of today's video, we're going to be taking a look at all 81 brawlers in the game right now and giving you guys the best build, the best gadgets, star power, gears, everything like that. It's going to be in alphabetical order, and I will put timestamps in the description below so you guys can just fast forward to whatever brawler you want to see. But this is going to be in terms of competitive, ranked, and this is literally the best place you can look at best builds on the entirety of YouTube. So make sure to subscribe if you're not already. Anyways, let's take a look at 8-bit. So 8-bit, I don't think anything has changed. If anything, boost is just getting better and better. I will always use the reload gear on it because it's a fixed percentage change. You're always going to get value out of it. And then I switch between, if it's a grassy map, probably speed. If it's heist, to go with damage. Everywhere else, I actually go with health. It's really good with him. And of course, extra credits in heist and cheat cartridge in every other game mode. Next up, we have Amber. So I will say I've been just using dancing flames pretty much everywhere. If you're playing ranked and you're facing off against snipers, and you might obviously want to use this, but dancing flames is just so good. Wild flames 100% of the times as always. And then with Amber, it kind of depends what type of Amber player you are. You can get a good value out of the mythic gear still, but it's quite pricey. Whilst you might want to opt for maybe like the vision gear on a grassy map, you might want to opt for 4 gadgets, which are just so good against tanks. But Amber's pretty versatile. You can use a lot of different gears with her. Next up, we have Angelo. So Angelo, pretty much all the time when we use sting and flight, so good at getting away. But there are some scenarios, especially in ranked, if you're not facing off against assassins, then you may as well go with this gadget. It's so good at catching your opponents off guard because you can hold down your attack, then press your gadget, and then quickly shoot, and then you pierce through a wall, and you can just one-shot so many brawlers, especially with your super combined. Really good synergy and power 100% of the time, definitely needed. And in terms of gears, I've actually been somewhat using the health gear. I know I haven't bought it, but I was using it in the championship challenge, for example, and it was pretty good with him. But I'd still probably just opt for the shield. He needs extra shield and damage because he deals so much damage. And then of course he's got his hypercharge, which isn't really that good, so I don't really advise buying it. Next up, we have Ash. Nothing changed. Chill pill 100% of the time, first bash 100% of the time, and then speed and damage 100%. You don't need to change anything with Ash. Next up, we have Barley. So I've been using the heal gadget all of the time with Barley. Even against assassins, I've been using this. This is such an underrated gadget. The pros are abusing it in knockout. They're abusing it in so many scenarios. And with the hypercharge combined, Barley is such a good brawler. You pair it with the healing star power, then he becomes just so hard to kill, even as this squishy brawler. So make sure to use medical use. I know extra nauseous, it's okay, but medical use is much better. Then I actually go with the gadget charge gear a lot of the time because having 4 lots of gadgets is just really changing Barley. You know, sometimes we'll go with shield though if it's like knockout and I know I'm going to be really passive. But again, the other gears don't really influence them, so make sure to use the gadget charge. And then his hyper charge, I won't really say it's worth the 5,000 coin investment. But if you like Barley and you got some spare coins and you want to get it, that is pretty decent. So next up, we've got B. I would use Rattled Hive pretty much all of the time, but you know, in a specific situation in ranked, if you're facing off against snipers or Gene, then this is pretty good to tank an extra shot or a Gene pool. And then in terms of star powers, I would say that average player enjoys Mr.p load a lot more, and I think it's pretty good. But competitive play, Honeycomb is used pretty much all of the time just because of the way you play B. The extra HP allows you to push up and not get countered by other snipers that just deal so much damage and can take down B too easily. And then of course with B, I go damage and shield gear every time. Next up, we've got Belle. So with Belle, you want to go pretty much nest egg all of the time, but I'm a little bit extra with Belle. I like to use this gadget because it's pretty fun. It's actually really good in knockout and also good in bounty because it's just good for pressure. You know, if you can hit this gadget in some good there's a lot of good angles on a lot of maps like out in the open, you can actually just start the bounce process whereas in normal situations you couldn't, and that gets you a lot of pressure. So that's why I like it. In terms of gears, you pretty much want to go with this setup every single time because Belle's squishy, and the reload gear you get infinite value. But if it's heist or if I'm facing off against tanks or something, I go with damage gear. If I'm facing off against other snipers, and shield gear every time. Positive feedback every single time. And the hyper charge itself isn't worth the 5,000 investment, but it's pretty underrated. It at least gives her a speed boost and she can get into the action. Next up, we have Berry. So in heist, I think this is definitely going to be the better gadget because you get 20% with one shot, which is crazy. But most time you probably want to use friendship. Is great, especially if you play ladder, because there's just so much assassins, and just at least pushing the opponents back is just a good mechanic to have. as a thrower, that is pretty insane. But like I said, both gadgets are good. You could probably use both of them. In terms of star powers, 100% of the time, floor is fine. It is such a broken star power. Additional 50% reload speed is crazy. Just so good. The other one just doesn't actually make much sense to me. I wouldn't use it. And then the best build with Berry, I've been pretty much using, I don't know, I've been kind of floating around a few things. I think extra gadget can be pretty good for 4 knockbacks. I think you definitely need shield gear, and then it's up to you whether you go with damage or the extra gadget charge. It's just up to you with Berry. And then finally we have Bibi. So with Bibi, I use this gadget 100% of the time. I use this star power 99% of the time. Maybe I might use this on a grassy map, but I don't really use it too much. And then with Bibi, I've been finding myself just using the gadget charge gear because it's just pretty good to get an extra extra healing. That means that you can push into the opponents that extra time, which can be good. You know, health gear can be underrated as well if you don't want to go the extra gadget. Damage gear is definitely needed, but either health or gadget. So next up we have a Bow. In terms of its gadget, I like Super Totem a lot more because you can cycle through 2 supers a lot quicker, but most people use Tripwire. It's pretty good in Brubble to score a goal and just to break open terrain in the right point. But again, I just like Super Totem, good for tanking like sniper shots and gene pools as well, so pretty versatile. In terms of star powers, Snare Bear 99% of the time. Maybe there's like Cavern Churn or just some weird map where this is better, but like I said, stun is just so good. In terms of gears, again, you want to use reload speed pretty much on every brawler that you can because it's just, you always get value from it. You can never not get value, so reload speed just makes complete sense. In terms of other gears, then I float between 3 of them. I will say most time I play Bow on a grassy map, so vision gear is really good with him. I will sometimes use health gear as well because he's got a decent amount of health, can allow him to get into the fight much quicker. Next up we have Bonnie. So in terms of gadgets, Sugar Rush 100% of the time, Black Powder 100% of the time. In terms of gears, this is the exact setup you want to use. It has changed. I used to use damage or health, but because of the change, so you need 3 hits instead of 4 with this gear, it's probably the best one to get with her. And then of course, since the projectile speed nerf, then you probably need the gadget charge gear as well, just to get that additional movement speed and of course reload speed as well. In terms of Brock, I think Brock can be pretty versatile because he's got 2 good gadgets. If you play a lot of ladder, then you want to use rocket laces, but for the most part I use Brock to open up the map and counter certain brawlers like throwers, or for example, so I use rocket fuel most of the time, especially in ranked. In terms of star powers, use more rockets, guys. It's a better star power. Once you learn how to use Brock and you learn how to hit your Brock supers, it's game changing. It can actually allow you to get kills and then cycle through to your next super a lot quicker. Rocket number 4 can be good if you play knockout or bounty, but again, it's very rare once you actually get into the fight or just move up the map after respawning that you'll actually reload a 4th rocket, unless the opponents are very bad because of the slow reload speed. So for me, just learn more rockets is better, especially with the hype charge as well. It gets an additional buffer as well. In terms of gears, reload speed gear all of the time, of course. Super slow reload speed, reload gear is going to really help him out. And then in terms of gears, it just depends on what game mode you play. If you play heist or if you need that extra damage gear is good, but most of the time you probably want to use shield gear, mainly because he's super squishy, so the extra 900 HP does a lot for him. And in terms of the hype charge, do not get it. It absolutely sucks, but if you've got it, pair it with more rockets, it's a little bit better. Next up we have Bull. So Bull Stomper is going to be better 99% of the time. I mean, sometimes I used to use T-Bone Injector, but 2k HP doesn't really do too much for you. Even on heights, Stomper is just better to confirm kills, and just if you know the opponent's Bull's using a Stomper, you just always got to be careful when he uses his super. In terms of star powers, sometimes you can get value with Berserker. It depends what type of Bull player you are. On high specifically, you probably want to use Berserker, but because of Bull, he's just get abused. I use Tough Guy. It just allows him to stay around and just be more annoying on the map. In terms of gears, there's a lot you can go with Bull. Again, it depends on the map. Speed's going to be good on him all of the time. I think if you wanted one gear that always got value, damage definitely for Bull, and then it's up to you. Sometimes like health, if it's a tough matchup, you want to go health on a tank, but if you're a good aggressive Bull player, then you can get value out of supercharge. But I would say be a lot more safer and go with something like this that would be better for the average player. In terms of Buster, I think slow-mo replay 100% of the time. I think Kevlar Vest 100% of the time. And then gears, again, it depends on whether it's grassy map or non-grassy map. That's why typically you need 3 gears on a lot of brawlers, but you can probably get away with going damage gear and extra gadget charge every time. You definitely want this gear, and then it's up to you whether you want speed or damage. Next up, we've got buzz, so you want to be using this gadget pretty much all of the time. I will say this is very, very good on grassy maps with buzz or sneaker fields. Can be pretty strong, but for the most part, just, you know, if you had to pick and just get one, you'd get this because you get value with it everywhere, especially with the hypercharge. Star Power's Ice Shop is definitely the better one because you can cycle through your super and your hypercharge a lot more effectively. But I will say you can switch this up in ranked specifically, but it takes a really good buzz player to make this one work. But it's really good at countering like Draco, for example, which people don't really know about too much, so can be underrated. In terms of gears, I pretty much just go this all the time. I will note though, I have been trying out health gear a lot more, especially once you get a kill. It's really good just to heal back up straight away, so then you can cycle through to your next super quicker and go in. But because I'm a bad buzz player, I use shield gear, so I'm sorry about that, guys. And then the hypercharge is very good. I would say it's worthwhile, even a 5,000 coin investment. Next up, Byron. So I use booster shots pretty much all of the time. It's so good at healing up your teammates, so good at cycling through to your next super, because if you can hit 2 of the 3 shots, which is quite easy with this gadget, you just need to hit another shot on top of that and you cycle through to a super. So you can just keep spamming out supers with this gadget. And then in terms of star powers, I use melees all of the time because it's just so good. I use his supers aggressively. So if you're an aggressive Byron player, melees is very good, especially against big tanky brawlers like Fang, Draco in the meta. You know, it's really good at countering kit synergies as well. So use melees. Injection's good if you want to like heal behind a Frank or a Draco, or if you're healing behind a Meg. Injection can be really good. I use the gadget charge gear and the shield gear now. I used to use damage, but then I realized like with Byron, like I don't want to stay low HP, right, because he's easy to take down, so I don't really use damage gear too much with him. Definitely shield gear, and then I mean you could use damage gear with him if you wanted to. Next up we have Colt. So Colt, I've actually seen a lot more people use heat ejector. If you're someone that plays a lot of ladder, I'm seeing a lot of people use this in heist, and it's very good. It deals a lot of damage to the high safe, and it's good against tanks, which is a lot of right now. But flying hook is better most of the time, but it does take a little bit more skill to like learn when the right moment is to go in, when someone's low HP or low on ammo. But it's good to pick up the first time bounty and just get pressure, etc. You want to use this star power all of the time. It's by far the better star power. Then in terms of gears, again, it depends on the matchup. You can always get value out of the damage gear. And then most of the time I actually use extra gadget gear because you want 4 flying hooks, which can be very beneficial. And then next up we've got Charlie. So the spider's nerf did impact her a little bit. I will say it's a better gadget most of the time, but personal space is underrated. Once you learn the cheesiness about it, can be pretty good effectively, especially against like brawlers that have piercing attacks. Then you definitely want to switch to gadget. Star power, again, both of them are just good. A lot of people use slimy, a lot of people use digestive, but you want to use digestive against tanky brawlers. So probably in a Frank tanky meta, digestive probably is a bit better. And then I use this setup every single time. Maybe on a grassy map I'll switch over to the vision, but I think you can never go wrong with an extra gadget with Charlie. Alright guys, so now moving into Chester, starting off with his gadget. Both gadgets are actually pretty good. I personally like candy beans. I don't know why, I just find it more fun. I think most competitive players probably use spicy dice more, just in case you get a trash super and you just want to spice things up, then that can be pretty good as well. Both are useful. In terms of star powers, 100% of the time, this star power is the main reason why Chester is actually pretty meta right now, and then I go with this setup pretty much all the time. Well, when you play on grassy maps, you probably want to opt for something maybe like this instead. That can be pretty underrated as well. Next up, we have Chuck. So with Chuck, you want to be using rerouting most of the time, but there will be some maps where Ghost Train will be the better one. For example, like parallel plays, I see Ghost Train used a lot, but rerouting's really good. Main reason being is because sometimes it's hard to get a post on a safe, so you can super up, quickly gadget, and then throw that post onto a safe. That's how the pros do it. And then in terms of gears, you want to be using damage and health every single time with Chuck. And then, I don't know, you don't really need an extra stop sometimes. I mean, there probably are some maps where it's useful, but most of the time I use Ticket Please just because it removes an ammo from the opponent. Both star powers are a bit meh in my opinion. Next up, Colette. So with this meta, got you all of the time, and then this particular meta, push it is by far the better option. I know sometimes I have the hates against it, but if you're playing Frank and other tanks, you need push it to just destroy them in that matchup. But of course, in heist, you still want to use mass attacks, and then this setup every single time. Sometimes so on grassy maps, I found vision pretty useful, or shield gear, but you just want to go damage. That's why you go Colette, right, to deal as much damage as possible. Next up, we have Colt. So most of the time, you use Colt on heist, you use speed loader, but then it might be an odd scenario where this might be okay. But I think if you was to buy one, definitely speed loader. In terms of star powers, I always say this, it literally is 50-50, trust me. If you're more about movement and getting up the map and, you know, juking the opponent, slick boots is good. But if you're more aim and you just want to melt people, especially with additional bullet speed, the Magnum Special is good. I use that one more. In terms of gears, I use this setup pretty much every single time because you use Colt for damage, right? So you want the damage gear, you want the reload speed gear every single time. Sometimes I might opt for this and this setup, but most of the time I use damage with Colt. Next up, we have Cordelius. So with Cordelius, you want to use replanting 99% of the time, guys. I know maybe in casual play, if you're against noobs, then Poison Mushroom probably is good because they will never see it coming because they're noobs and they're facing off against Edgar. But this is just way more versatile, so good at countering so many different things. Countering just shots coming your way, countering a powerful super, jumping onto a thrower. Combines really well with your hypercharge and your super. It is just better. In terms of star powers, combo shrooms is the meta star power now, especially because you just need that extra DPS with Cordelius in a tanky meta. You use Cordelius to rip through tanks, so why not use combo shrooms? This used to be good, but I feel like now it's a little bit harder to cycle through to your supers now, so you just get value with it every single gunfight. And then in terms of gears, I use this setup every single time. You want the gadget charge gear, absolutely, and then probably damage gear because you use Cordelius for damage, right? So it just makes sense to use it. And then the hypercharge probably isn't worth the 5,000 coin investment, but if you like Cordelius, it's still a good hypercharge. Next, we got Crow. So Crow, I use slow and toxing all of the time. I did go through a period where I used defense booster, but I just still feel like you don't really need it. You may as well just go slow and just, you really got to use it at the right time. Make sure your teammates are ready to pinch, and then it's pretty good. And in terms of star powers, you know, extra toxic is probably the better one. But for the way I use Crow, I like carrying Crow. It's good against tanks, and there's just tanks everywhere, so of course you're going to get a lot of value. And specifically in heists, you get more value against carrying Crow because you get extra damage onto the heist safe as well with your hypercharge. And in terms of gears, this is the optimal setup pretty much most cases. If you're playing a grassy map, then you might want to opt for like the speed and then maybe this, but because you need the extra damage, I know mythic gear isn't that good, but you need extra damage with Crow. You just need it. Any little help is just the reason why Crow's inviolable. And then his hypercharge is really fun and it's really good in heist. It's actually the main reason why he's even competitive right now, because of that hypercharge. So I would say the investment probably is worth it with Crow. Next up with Darryl, it doesn't even matter what combination you go, to be honest. I would say Barley is the better gadget, but you probably need recall and rotator just so you can cycle through supers more. It's better on the high safe, etc, etc. I've been finding that rolling reload is actually better in this meta. I know I've always used steel hoops, but just the extra reload and just, I don't even know, both of them are terrible. Darryl, I hate using them. All right, next we got gears. So I think this is the best setup by far. Extra health, because Darryl has so many bad matchups, so just the extra health enables him to heal up and then he can charge in much sooner. And of course, damage gear is really good with tanks. Next we have Doug. So it doesn't really matter what you use on Doug because he's terrible, but pretty much all of the time you only want to use Doug on a grassy map because everywhere else he's pointless. So speed gear, absolutely. Damage gear, absolutely, because a lot of times with Doug you're going to be shooting, right? So you're going to get extra healing with the damage gear. But not only that, it's not really many chances to heal up properly. So I go with this setup and then self-service all of the time because, you know, a 3-second movement speed isn't really going to help you out with Doug. You use Doug just to get up close to people. And then in terms of Draco, you want to use a last stand 100% of the time. This is actually a good gadget, but because of the way you use the synergy with the gadget, this is so good. One of the best gadgets in the game, fundamentally broken. Keeps you alive for 2 seconds. You cannot die. There's no counterplay to this gadget. except for just waiting and hoping he doesn't kill you before this gadget burns out. So last stand, absolutely. I did like expose whilst trying him out. I thought you'd get a lot more value out of his normal form, but his normal form is terrible, so you don't really get value out of expose. Can be good in heist, but shredding and this gadget combination is by far the best build. Don't let anyone else tell you anything different. This is the meta build. And then of course, because he's got a broken gadget, you want the gadget charge gear. It's just so good. And then because he's a tank, I use the damage gear. You can get value out of the health gear as well. It just depends on what you prefer. If you prefer a lot more HP, well, healing up quicker, then health is going to be better for you. But just the way I play tanks, I find a lot more value with the damage gear. So now we're moving on to Dynamite. So starting off with his gadget, satchel charge 100% of the time, such a broken gadget. Star powers 100% of the time, demolition. The nearly 2k extra damage is insane. You pair this as well with the hypercharge, you can one shot so many brawlers. You need to use it. If you want to farm clips and just be an idiot, go with Dyna jump, but demolition is way better. In terms of gears, I use this setup pretty much every single time. I know Dynamite's squishy, but you want the additional damage. If you can just stack all things damage on his build, he just melts through everything. Next up, we have Edgar. So let's fly. You want to use pretty much 99% of the time. Maybe if you play probably like knockout, I don't know why you play Edgar or knockout or duels, for example, then hardcore probably is better because you can just passively sit in the back and then win every matchup with this gadget. In terms of gears, I think I've been using this setup a lot more. Main reason being is because you need that extra HP now with Edgar when you jump in, because he isn't as broken as before, so you need that extra shield. And then I use supercharge mainly because sometimes you may be in a weird position where you kill someone but you're just so far away from supers, so just helps you when you're kind of out of let's fly gadgets or just in a sticky situation. And then of course you want to be star powers, it depends on the matchup. I don't really find fisticuffs actually being that good, but it does help you cycle through to super a bit better. But hard landing's just good against squishy brawlers. I don't know, both star powers actually don't really do too much to me, but the hypercharge is very broken, so make sure you buy that with Edgar. With El Primo, you want to be using a first gadget pretty much all of the time. This one's can be good at countering certain things, you know, maybe if you play Primo and parallel plays, for example, to push people away from unbreakable walls, it can be good. But I use this gadget. It's the main reason why I use Primo, to counter certain tanks. Throw them in the air allows you to kill them quicker. I use El Fuego most of the time. Sometimes it depends on how I'm feeling with Primo. If I'm a bad Primo player today, then I use this star power, but most of the time you need that extra bit of damage. An extra 2k damage is really good. And then in terms of gears, I use this setup with Primo because you want to cycle through supers quick. So this supercharge effectively, when you especially when you jump onto multiple players, you can just stun lock them with your super. And then the hypercharge isn't actually worth buying at all, so I wouldn't even bother with it. Next up, we have Ems. You're going to be using this gadget 100% of the time. Without it, Ems is so easy to counter. In terms of star powers, a lot of people use bad karma, to be honest. I like hype just because of the way I use the super, because if you can get multiple people within your super, it's going to get you a lot of HP and then just enables you to cycle more, but she doesn't really do a lot of damage, so I might try out bad karma a little bit more, and it's better in heist. And then in terms of gears, I use this setup most of the time. Of course, if it's a bushy map, I will go for this setup. If it's a non-bushy map, I will go for the extra knockback. It's very good on Ems, and the hypercharge is definitely not worth it. I wouldn't bother using it at all. Next up, we have Eve. So of course you want to use first gadget all of the time. You want to use unnatural order most of the time. Again, both star powers doesn't really matter with Eve, so to be honest, I wouldn't even buy one if you had to, but if you really wanted to, I think unnatural order is better. And then I stay with this setup every time. It is the best one, definitely the Roto gear. And then this one's pretty decent, but I will say sometimes it can be underwhelming. Next up with Fang, I will say that Roundhouse Kick is the better gadget overall, but I find myself going corn through a lot, especially just to be annoying to the opponents. It does quite a bit of damage, especially if you can get a couple of popcorns off. That can be like nearly 3k damage if you get 3 off in time. In terms of star powers, I think in the competitive meta, Divine Souls is better because most people are using Fang on knockout or bounty, and they're using him in isolated incidences, so they're only going for one person, because right now with Fang it's really hard to chain and get much benefit out of fresh kicks, because by that time you're probably dead because of the amount of hyper charges and etc. But fresh kicks is better against bad players, so if you're just in the normal player pool, not in the top 0.1%. Fresh kicks is better. But in terms of gears, I've been going with this because I've been realizing that I just get shredded when I dash in now with Fang. So I need that extra HP in the hypercharge. I actually wouldn't say it's worth it. It takes so long to cycle through to it. It can be good, but I don't know. It's not really worth it in this meta, in my opinion. Next up, we have Frank. So by far the better gadget this meta is active noise cancelling, because effectively when you've got your hypercharge, there's no counter to it. There's no counter. So he can just destroy everything. I will say this one used to be my favorite. It is still good. But in a Frank 1v1 as well, you need active noise cancelling. Enables you to get free supers, enables you to cycle more, etc, etc. Power grab is better in this meta as well. So we had a complete switch with Frank. It's better because you can confirm kills a lot more frequently with Frank now. And then you get the benefit of 12 seconds dealing like nearly 4k damage to the opponent. And you're just unstoppable once you get that first kill. And then that's by far the best setup for Frank. And the hypercharge is absolutely worth it. One of the best in the game. I would buy it whilst Frank is meta. Next up, we have gadgets. So Twister is better one overall. I will say Spring Ejector can be good in some scenarios, and some maps can be really good, especially there's just a lot of cheesy synergies. You know, for example, if you want to jump into the mid on Kaboom Canyon, it can be pretty good. Next up, I think Blustery Bow definitely is the better star power now in this meta. Reason being is because you want to cycle through supers, counter tanks, and it pairs so well with his hypercharge super. So you want to be using this star power, even though Freeze and Snow is good on open maps, but the stun's just way better. And then in terms of the gears, again, it depends on the map. Most of the time you just get infinite value with damage gear and shield gear, but of course grassy maps, this is so underrated. The vision gear is so underrated on Gale, on like double swoosh. And then lastly we have Gene. In terms of gadgets, most of the time you use Gene on a more open map, so Vengeful Spirits is the better gadget. But if you're playing Gem Grab or something, or if facing off against an assassin, or you're playing Lado, you might be scared of all of these assassins, then Lamp Blowout is good. In terms of star powers, Magic Puffs is definitely the better one. But again, if you're in ranks and you can swap between star powers, Spirit Slap is really good against brawlers that are above like 6k HP, I'd say, because you actually need that extra DPS, especially when you're pulling someone close. And it pairs really well with his hypercharge. In terms of gears, you definitely need this setup. But sometimes you might play Gene on like Shooting Star on a more open map. So I'd say buy one of either health or shield. I use shield because it just helps me against those snipers. Now moving on to Gray, starting off with his gadgets. You want to be using Walking Cane 100% of the time, and then star powers, it depends what game mode you play. Most time you want to be using New Perspective, but if you're facing off against a sniping gem grabber like Angelo, this can be good, and it's just better in knockout and bounty for survivability. In terms of gears, I go this pretty much all of the time because Gray doesn't have much DPS, so damage gear is good. But at the same time, it pairs fake injury pairs really well with shield gear, so you probably want to go something like that. Next up we have Griff. So Piggy Bank 100% of the time. You want to be going Business Resilience 100% of the time as well. Maybe if you're facing off against a lot of tanks, and Keep the Change can be good. But I think the reason why I use Griff is just to get a lot of pressure on a map, especially if you play Hot Zone, which Griff, most of the time, that's where he's seen. So Business Resilience is used for that reason. You'll be using Reload Speed all of the time. And then, again, it's kind of up to you. I think Health Gear probably is your best bet. But there's quite a few maps in the game where an extra Wall Break is very beneficial. So it's super underrated on Griff, in my opinion. Next up, we have Grom. So Radio Check pretty much all of the time. But I don't know, maybe if you've got both gadgets and you're facing a Gene, then Watchtower is good. Or if you play, I don't know why you play him on double swoosh or something, but it can be good. But you play Grom mainly on maps like Shooting Star or Bounty, so you want to be using that gadget. Next up, this star power 100% of the time. And then in terms of gears, I don't really know with Grom. I mean, you use him for damage, right? He is pretty squishy, so you probably get the most value out of this setup. But an extra gadget can be pretty good to confirm kills. You know, Grom sucks, so you just need something like that to make him better. Next up, we have Gus. So this gadget all of the time, and then this star power all of the time. In terms of gears, I pretty much go for this setup. Sometimes I will opt for the extra cookie popper, especially if I'm facing off against snipers. Then I will find that an extra time to kill them is just pretty good for Gus. Next up we've got Hank. Sorry. So in terms of gadgets, Barricade is just by far the better gadget. Just allows them to be even more tankier, and that is the reason why, well, with this star power as well, all of the time as well, and that's the reason why I use the extra gear now. I know the health gear is good with him, I know, but trust me, the way that you play Hank is that you just want to keep up charging, you want to keep charging your bubbles. There's hardly any time for you to heal up, so I don't actually like health gear that much on him anymore, so I'd rather go with this. Keep up the pressure consistently, get an extra shield, which should be able to make an extra play, and your super heals you up anyway. So if you cycle through supers effectively, you can always stay top. So yeah, I just find myself never getting the time to heal with Hank. You get what I mean? Next up, we got Jacky. So first gadget all of the time, counter crusher all of the time. You just never swap away from these builds. And then with Jacky, pretty much you want to use speed and damage because you use Jacky on grassy maps, right? But there might be some odd occasions where an extra speed gadget will be very good, because you realize, right, once you run out of gadgets, you're a pretty easy target a lot of the time. So an extra gadget can allow you just to make more plays on the map. Jacky's hypercharge is really good as well. Main reason why she's actually viable in Brawl. Next up we have Janet. So drop the base pretty much all of the time. Sometimes this can be pretty funky, but it's just better to stop the opponents from regenning, and allows you to scout bushes with the gadget. Vocal warm up all of the time, and then mainly use Janet on maps with bushes, so this is probably going to be your best setup, but a lot of times she does lack for DPS, so those non-bushy maps you want to be going with the damage and the shield gear. Next we have Jessie. So pretty much most of the time you'll be going spark plug because it slows the opponent, allows you to take them down quicker. It's a very strong gadget. And then of course in Heist, Recall Spring is a very good gadget. In terms of the gears, so again, depends on where you play on. If you play a lot of Jessie and Heist, of course, this setup is going to be by far your better option. Well, not with Shock, I don't know why I've got that on. But then most of the time, you probably want to go with like speed and damage, speed and shield. There's a lot of versatility with Jessie. And then, of course, energized all of the time. I've been experimenting with Shocky, but I just can't. I can't justify a reason to use it. Against noobs, maybe it's good, but yeah, Scrappy 2.0 as well. Definitely a good hypercharge. Make sure to buy that. And then lastly with Kit. So I find that Cheeseburger is the better gadget most of the time, especially if you're using a cheesy composition. For example, Draco, any tanks, Cheeseburger is going to be your better gadget. But this gadget is very broken as well. You're literally invisible for 3 seconds. It can be really good at the start of a game. For example, if you're facing off against like snipers, and you can like free tap snipers because of how much damage Kit does, or just get a couple of swipes off early game and then you can jump straight onto your teammate. It's just very good. I like this gadget. So of course, the way you use Kit, you're not really going to get much benefit out of the damage gigs. Most of the time you're going to be on top of a teammate. So extra gadget, very vital with Kit. And then the shield gear, of course, Kit's quite squishy, so you want to be making sure you use that. And of course, it just matters what game mode you play the most. Both star powers are pointless in their in the other game modes. Like this one's pointless in Showdown, this one's pointless in 3v3. So now we're going to be moving into Larry and Laurie. So in terms of gadgets, this gadget definitely the better one. The other gadget is just absolutely useless, and star powers as well. This is going to be the better one overall. And in terms of gears, this setup that I go with, you could probably go with this most of the time, but I like the extra chance to heal, so I go with the gadget gear. In terms of Leon, lollipop drop pretty much all of the time. Some people use this gadget for whatever reason, I don't know why, but lollipop drop is better. In terms of star powers, since the nerf to his super charge rate, I've been finding smoke trails is better. I don't know what it is. I've been finding that it's better. Main reason because you can cycle through to supers a lot quicker. If you're close to someone and you just shred through them, you get another super, and then you can cycle through to hypercharge much quicker. So I'm actually liking smoke trails. Trust me, try it, guys. And in terms of gears, I normally go with this setup with Leon. Sometimes I might want to opt for something like this with a mythic gear. An extra 2 seconds can be pretty good. Enables you to make more of a play, and the hypercharge is very, very good with Leon. In terms of Lily, Vanish 100% of the time. I've not even had the chance to use this gadget, but Vanish is one of the best gadgets in the game. Star powers, I will say this star power is very underrated. When you already, so if the brawler is pretty much like a typical sniper, then you don't need that extra damage with the star power. So you may as well go with this, which is really good. It enables you to cycle through to your next super easier. I mean, in terms of gears, I pretty much go, well, it's a toss-up. You definitely need this gear, and then it's out of the damage or the shield gear. Most of the time I just use damage, but shield gear is so good. You have like 9k HP with Lily with it. It's crazy. Dumb busted. Next up we have Lola. So in terms of gadgets, freeze frames definitely going to be a better gadget. Star powers, it depends on what Lola play off. If you need the extra DPS, which you probably do in this meta, then improvise is better. If you're playing a more passive Lola, this star power is very underrated. Really good for keeping you alive, especially in hot zone and as a gem carrier. In terms of Lola's best build, definitely the reload speed gear. And then again, depends where you play Lola. If you play Lola on a more open map, of course, damage is going to be better. And then there's a lot of maps where vision gets very, very good with Lola. So I'd say it's really, really underrated. With Lu, this gadget, 100%. Hypothermia, 100%. In terms of gears, I never switch away from this. Never, 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 never. This is just by far the best. Enables you to cycle super with one less shot. And then, of course, having 4 freeze gadgets can just be so good at cycling your super. You definitely need that setup. In terms with Maisie, I never swap from this build whatsoever. First gadget, second star power, and then the damage and the extra gadget charge. Having an extra dash is really good. In terms of hyper charge as well, you want to be making sure I don't really... It's a good hyper charge, but I wouldn't really buy 5,000. Well, spend 5,000 on it. Same with Lu as well. I wouldn't really spend 5,000 on it. It's not like game breaking. In terms of Mandy, this one's always up for debate because Caramelize is really good, and especially if you know you can get the combination of the slow and then super, it's a confirmed kill pretty much all of the time. So I would say this is probably the better one. But the way I play Mandy, I like this surprise element. You know, for example, someone's behind a wall and you're one shot of super, or if they're weak, you can confirm a kill or get that extra shot you need and then use super pretty quick and you get a kill. Of course, this star power is definitely the better one. And Mandy's squishy and she's really good with extra damage, so damage gear is going to be really good on her. Next up, we got Max. So phase shifter, definitely going to be the better gadget. Star power definitely is the better star power. I know sometimes if you're a passive Max, supercharge can be pretty good, but you may as well go run a gun. You have infinite ammo. And then with Max, I always have this dilemma, right? I never know what gear is the best. Everyone switches. I think most people use a shield gear with Max because it enables you just to win so many interactions and just be a lot more aggressive. I personally like the health gear a lot with Max because she's kind of, I wouldn't really say tanky, but medium HP. You can get back into the action a lot more, and that's what you need with Max. You need a fast pace, so health gear allows you to keep up with that. But often I switch damage gear or extra gadget charge. It's up to you. And then in terms of Meg, you want to be using, both gadgets can be good. I think Jolting Volts is a better gadget right now though, because you can just spam them out and keep pressure. In terms of star power, I feel like heavy metal is better in this meta. There's so much aggression with Lily, so it's really good at knocking Lily back, dealing damage, and keeping you safe. This one, of course, is going to be better into snipers or knockout, bounty. And in terms of gears, again, I always had this toss up on what to go with Meg. I feel like this probably is the best setup right now because you just want to be so aggressive. Extra damage, because she's tanky, you're going to get a lot of value out of the damage gear, and then the shield's just better. You always get value out of it. The health gear can be pretty good, but I feel like once you get in striking distance with Meg, it's hard to actually find any chance to heal up, so that's probably the best setup. So now moving on to Melodie, starting off with the gadgets. I think Interlude is by far the best one, and then in terms of star powers, fast beats is always going to be your better star power. And then in terms of gears, I pretty much never swap away from this setup unless I'm playing heist. I might want to go with the damage gear, but you pretty much want that extra shield every single time with Melodie. With Mico, I think this is the better gadget. Extra DPS is slow, can allow you to confirm jumps a lot easier, but sometimes Presto is better, especially for the surprise element. I kind of go back and forth between gadgets. Monkey Business everywhere except for heist, or of course you're playing showdown, then you want to be going with this one. But of course Monkey Business is a really strong star power because if you time it right, you can essentially have like 4 pieces of ammo in a gunfight and that will win you fights. And then of course you want to go with this setup every single time. And of course, never buy Hypercharge, it's terrible. Next up with Mortis, you want to be going this gadget every single time. It's just so good to cycle through supers, make more plays. You can get some good combinations with this one, but I think you just get more value most time with this. Star power, definitely cool with Snake. I mean, in terms of gears, as you can see, I use this setup. I know a lot of people hate it on the Mythic gear, but I really like it. It enables you to heal up faster, get kills faster, and if you're a bad Mortis player, you can cycle through so easily with this. But if you're a comfortable Mortis player, you probably can never go wrong with going this type of setup. Next up, we got Mr.p. So Mr.p service bell is going to be your better gadget. Sometimes this can be okay and just annoying, but it's going to be a better one overall. Star power is definitely revolving door, gives you additional HP and damage, and then you never really want to swap away from this build with Mr.p. Next up, we have Nani. So with Nani, it depends on what game mode you play on. Most of the time, you're probably going to get the most value, I would say, out of probably a setup like this. But of course, if you're playing bounty, knockout, you want to go with this setup. If you're playing every other game mode, especially heist, then you want to be using the teleport to teleport in behind enemy lines onto the heist safe. Very good. And of course, you're never going to die with that star power. I mean, again, it depends on what game mode you play on. So if you're playing heist, you want that extra gadget with Nani. If you're playing bounty, knockout, then you want this setup instead. And then next up, we got Nita. So Nita, most of the time you want to be using this setup, but in a tanky meta, I actually find this stun very good. For example, if you face off against a Fang, Bibi, anything aggressive, bear pause is so good just to interrupt them, give them some more space, cancel out their super, etc. I think as well, people have been experimenting a lot more with hyper bear, especially with the hypercharge. It can actually be pretty good, but for the most part, you're pretty safe just going with this setup and just wasting so much opponent ammo. And then most of the time you use Nita on a grassy map, right? It doesn't make sense to use her outside of a grassy map too often because she's so easy to just run away from. But of course, if it's a non-grassy map, you just, I don't know, you can go with the other ones, but it doesn't really matter too much. Next up, we have Otis. So Otis, of course, this gadget every time, this star power every single time. Don't even need to debate it. And in terms of Otis, most of the time you use them on a grassy map. So of course, you want the vision gear, and then it's up to you what second gear you want to go. Most of the time, I just go with this. You can use the supercharged gear, but it doesn't really help that much with Otis, to be honest. You're probably best off using the damage gear with him. And then next up, we've got Pam. So Pam, you want to be using Scrap Sucker 100% of the time. You want to be using Mama Squeeze pretty much all of the time, unless it's like a super open map. But then 96 healing per shot, it's not really that much. You use Pam for the healing and to stop people from destroying your healing station. So of course you need this star power. And then again, it depends what map. Sometimes you use Pam on a grassy map and it's really underrated, so Vision Gear is good. Of course, HP as well. She's very tanky, and you're using her in hot zone. You want to just keep beefed up. But a lot of times I like an extra Scrap Sucker, especially if you just sat in the turret, getting that extra healing. The Mythic Gear is the thing that you need the most with Pam. But lastly, we have Pearl. So Pearl, Overcooked gadget 100% of the time. So good at confirming kills. And in terms of star powers, of course, you'll be using the shield one pretty much every single time. You see me using this one a lot more though, because it's a very aggressive meta where you want to use your supers a lot more. So it can be pretty underrated. In terms of gears, I go with this a lot of the time. There will be the odd chance I use Pearl on a grassy map, so Vision Gear can be pretty underrated. And of course, never buy the Hypercharge. So now moving on to Penny, starting off with the gadget, you want to be using Salty Barrel all of the time. And in a really aggressive meta, Master Blaster probably is better, but this star power is good as well. I don't know, both of them are a bit meh. They just have some use case, but not really too powerful. In terms of the best build, probably want to go with this one every single time. You don't really get much value out of the other gears. With Piper then, so this meta is very suited to the auto-aim gadget. It's just so good and just good against everything. Of course, if you're playing a long-range map, then Homemade Recipe is going to be very good at confirming kills. In terms of star powers, Snappy Sniping, I use even on grassy maps. The extra damage is good, but it's just so when you stop tapping with Piper, this is going to help you a lot just to get more DPS out. In terms of gears, then I go with this setup a lot of the time. Of course, Piper's squishy, especially since the HP nerf not too long ago. So I use shield gear no matter what. And then again, just depending on what type of Piper player you are. Damage gear can be good with her, and the extra gadget can be good, especially if you're looking to counter tanks or just confirming a kill with Homemade Recipe. Next up, Poco. So Tuning Fork's going to be a better option pretty much all of the time. But I don't know, maybe you're facing, it's not really much Lou in the meta, but I don't know, if you're trying to remove some adverse effects for whatever reason, then of course Protective Tunes can be underrated. In terms of Poco in this meta, I will say Decapo probably is the better one, because you're literally using Poco to heal up those tanks consistently. But I'm a very selfish Poco player, so I go with Screeching Solo most of the time. It can be really good for cycling supers. And then for the most part, you probably want to go with something like this if you really, really want to heal up your teammates. And this is the best option by far. Extra gadget, because Tuning Fork is just so good since the buff it received not too long ago. Next up, we have RT. So out of line, you probably want to use 90% of the time. If you're playing on a super long range map like Shooting Star, for example, then you may as well switch over to Hacks. Sometimes people use this. I don't know why. You may as well just use Hacks. In terms of the star powers, then Recording is going to be your best option pretty much every single time. An extra 3 seconds can be okay, but there's not really too much point in it. In terms of gears then, so if you're using RT to counter tanks, then this is going to be your best setup, because the extra health is really good with him. I mean, you probably want to even opt for the shield gear just to really get that beefiness and take down those tanks. And of course, the extra gadget is just so good because you have 4 chances to make plays, counter tanks, you know, just be annoying to the opponents. Next up, we have Rico. So this is always a hard one. Multiple launcher definitely is a better gadget right now. Super bouncy definitely is a better star power right now. But if you've got a bad matchup, Robo Retreat can be pretty good. For example, if you're facing off against a thrower or a sniper, Robo Retreat can be pretty good, but I just find more value as super bouncy. If you're good Rico, you're going to wreck with his star power. In terms of gears then, so I always go reload speed, no matter what. I know Rico has a fast reload speed, but trust me, just go it. You're just going to terrorize people using this gear. And then in terms of the other gear, it's up to you. There's just so much flexibility with Rico. Because of his broken gadget, I used to go with this setup, but now because it's kind of squishy, I don't know, you use Rico on a lot of grassy maps, so vision is good. And then damage, of course, you just want to deal pure damage to Rico, so probably this setup would be pretty beneficial. In terms of Rosa, you want to, it just depends on the matchup. I think you get value pretty much most of the time out of this one, because sometimes this can hurt you, but then sometimes this can be really good for you. It just depends on the matchup, but most time unfriendly bushes. I find Thorny Gloves the better star power, because once you cycle through to your super, you're already unstoppable. Give you extra damage, you're just ripping through everyone, especially tanks, because normally enemy tanks counter Rosa, but with this star power, you're able to actually win the fight. So that's why I go Thorny Gloves. And in terms of gears, you play Rosa on grassy maps, so this is just the optimal build for sure. Hypercharge is really good with her, so I'd actually buy it. In terms of roughs, I go air support pretty much 95% of the time. Maybe if I'm facing snipers or Jean, then take cover can be pretty good. Star power, this one pretty much all the time. Maybe if you're doing some cheesy strategy and knockout with Jean or something, then this can be pretty good. But to open up maps, it's definitely very beneficial. And then, of course, you want to be going this setup. Unless you're playing like Hard Drop Mine or something, then you want to be going damage and shield every single time. Next up, Sam. So, of course, this one, all of the time. The heart recovery, all of the time. His build never changes. I just go with this every single time, because with Sam, you're always on the move, and you're supposed to die with Sam a lot of times, right? You're gonna get killed a lot, so shield gear when you respawn just makes sense with Sam. And then Sandy, in terms of the gadget, Sweet Dreams by far the better one. Rude Stance is by far the better star power 99% of the time. And then with gears, I go with speed and the damage gear now. And because of the hypercharge nerf, I think the mythic gear actually received a bit of a nerf as well, because you only really throw your super aggressive with your hypercharge, right? So I'm not really using much of the mythic gear anymore, so that's the setup I go with. And finally, moving on to Shelly. So starting with the gadget, clay pigeon is going to be better all of the time. Shell shock as well, it's going to be a better option, because you can combine with your clay pigeons and confirm kills all of the time. In terms of band-aid, it can be pretty good in knockout, bounty and showdown, but I'd rather, it's only 2000 HP, so I'd rather just go with shell shock. And then again, depends on where you play Shelly. Speed, grassy map, and then everywhere else you want to go with damage and the gadget gear. Next up, we have spikes. So life plant you want to be using everywhere except for heights, where you want to be using popping pin cushion, and then you want to use curveball. Although on the new modifier in ranked, I predict fertilize to be pretty strong, but I will say curveball is just better all the time. I've been using the shield gear on spike because I feel like he's super squishy and he's just getting picked on right now, so shield gear helps him. But of course, grassy map vision gear is going to be good, and damage, use spike for damage, right? So it makes sense. In terms of sprout, you're going to be using transplant every single time. And then, of course, overgrowth all the time to confirm kills on cycle super. And then I go with this setup all of the time as well. Sometimes I might want to opt for the gadget charge, but shield gear is very good. Squeak, you're going to be using residue all the time. And then I've actually been using chain reaction a lot more in this meta. I know this can be pretty good, but I think it really lacks the DPS in a 1v1, so I think you need chain reaction. And then damage and the extra gadget charge. And then with Stu, it depends on what game mode you play. If you play like Hot Zone or Gem Grab, Speed Zone's good. If you're being more aggressive and you need to destroy key walls on the map, then Breakthrough is going to be good. Of course, Gaster Heal is going to be your better option all of the time. There's some matchups which this is good on, but you may as well use Gaster Heal. And then, I don't know, most of the gears are pretty hard to get effective value with, but I just use damage and shield gear, even though it's pretty... I mean, shield gear is good with him because you can heal back up and enable it. Damage gear is... I don't know, it doesn't do a lot of damage, so I may as well use it. Next up with Surge, so Power Shield is the better gadget right now, in my opinion. In competitive play, people use Power Surge more because pros really know how to keep you at that first level. But pretty much everybody that plays this game you're going to be able to get a first level from. So power shield is your better option. Serve ice cold, of course, you want to be using. I was using this with the bug because this star power didn't work, but of course now it's fixed, so you can go that. And then again, depends what map you play Surge on. Most of the time I play Surge on a grassy map, so I think this is the best option. But of course, if there's no grass, you may as well go for this. And then next up, we've got Tara. Tara, support from beyond all of the time. I use healing shade as well, pretty much all of the time as well. Sometimes if you're facing off against snipers or other things, black portal can be better, but I just like healing shade. Sometimes you can get a lot of value. And then with gears, again, it depends where you play Tara. If it's non-grassy, go with this setup. If it's grassy, I'm actually liking the extra gadget charge just to give you that extra tankiness with the pets surrounding you. Next up, we've got Tick, so I go with last hurrah 100% of the time. In terms of star powers, well, oil definitely is the better star power, but if it's in ranked and you're not facing off against a thrower, there's no real point using this. You may as well go automatic. You can spam out shots more. I think it's a very underrated star power, especially since it got a reload nerf, what, nearly a year ago now, I think, maybe even longer. But I've just been using it even more. And then as you can see, I only use these gears because they are the best gears to Tick. Don't use any other ones. Don't let anyone teach you any other levels of delusion. It is better than the hypercharge, isn't worth buying. And then finally, we've got Willows. So in terms of gadgets, I use Dive all of the time, mainly because the biggest weaknesses to Willow are going to be like a Buzz Stun or any type of assassin. So at least it buys you time. It can cancel out some of their utility. So that's why I go Dive. Good to dodge a tune pool, for example. And then star powers both got buffed, but I'm not really feeling the value with either of them. I use Love is Blind because at least you get some value out of it, whilst her super is still so hard to hit. So I just can't really see myself using this star power. And then I go with this setup every time. It just makes sense with a thrower. You can always go damage and the shield gear. So that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I know there's probably not too many changes out there, but every single update you guys asked for it. I mean, I guess with the new brawlers, and there are some changes with the meta shifting a lot. But yeah, that's going to be it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.